If you want to share your stories, contact with us via our mail. Thank you. Watch closely. This 36-year-old young man in front of us is named John. He's the owner of a local inn. His family is relatively well off. John's family is harmonious. He and his wife treat each other with respect, something I really envy. However, his wife has a strong personality and is obsessed with money. She holds the financial power in the family, leaving John with little pocket money each month. A stylish young woman arrived at the inn entrance, dressed fashionably. She claimed to be a dance student, looking for a job and a place to stay, and planned to stay for 6 months. Good fortune had arrived. John was overjoyed. They agreed on a rent of 10 cents per day. In the first month, Emily would go out early and return late every day. Sometimes when she ran into John, she would even greet him proactively. Emily was very attractive. Her smile was as beautiful as a blooming spring flower, making John's heart flutter, even drooling a bit at the corner of his mouth. From then on, whenever he saw Emily smiling at him as she was leaving, John felt like he was being gently caressed by a spring breeze. Sometimes even, watching Emily's graceful figure as she left, John would have some indescribable thoughts in his heart. Unexpectedly, John's thoughts soon became a reality. In June of that year, Emily had been staying here for almost 2 months, and was already an old acquaintance of John. He learned that Emma, at a young age, had been through a failed marriage. After her divorce, she coincidentally started learning dance. The more they talked, the more they enjoyed each other's company, the more they felt connected, fulfilling each other's emotional needs. It felt like they had met too late. At this moment, John brought out a bottle of imported wine. Emily said she could drink a little. After a few glasses, they both started feeling a bit tipsy. At this point, Emily confessed to John, saying she hadn't had a job for a long time and had no source of income. Now, she couldn't afford to stay any longer, but still wanted to continue living there. Her words carried a sense of pity. It's in most men's nature to pity beautiful women. Seeing Emily in such a pitiful state, he couldn't help but feel touched. But after all, he is a businessman. He couldn't do a losing deal. So, in a mutual glance, they both understood each other's intentions. Just like that, the two went full speed ahead in the room, and agreed this would offset her rent. Emily continued this arrangement for more than half a year. Their practice sessions lasted until the end of the year. John thought that by connecting with Emily and waiving her rent, it was a win-win situation. But how Emily saw it, John clearly didn't know. At the end of that year, Emily said it was hard to find a good job and wanted to return to her hometown. John felt reluctant when she was about to leave. After all, in John's mind, their arrangement had gone smoothly. Or rather, this business deal was quite enjoyable. But unexpectedly, 2 months later, John realized just how naive his thoughts were. Naive indeed. 2 months later, John received a call from Emily. In the call, Emily said she was in financial difficulty and wanted to borrow some money from him. As a businessman, John, like all businessmen, doesn't do losing deals. Now, since he no longer had any connection with Emily, he immediately refused. Seeing that John wouldn't lend her money, Emily directly laid her cards on the table. "If you don't want to lend me money, I'll report you for assault. Don't forget, I have photos of us together. I'll send them to your wife." Hearing this, John felt a chill in his heart. Whether she reported him or sent the photos to his wife, both consequences would be unbearable. The former would damage his reputation. The latter would be life-threatening if his wife found out. Only then did John realize he had picked a rose with thorns. With no other choice, John transferred Emily $5,000. He thought this would be the end of it. But unexpectedly, just half a month later, Emily called again asking for money, this time asking for $10,000. With no choice, compared to the consequences of reporting or letting his wife find out. This $10,000 seemed the lesser evil, so John borrowed from friends to gather $10,000. He thought this matter would finally be over. But who would have guessed that John's wife accidentally discovered John's transfer records? After pressing him about it, John's story quickly went viral. His wife flew into a rage and immediately called the police. Soon, the police arrested Emily on extortion charges and prosecuted her. Emily extorted a total of $15,000 in 2 instances, which is considered a substantial amount. Therefore, the court eventually sentenced her to 4 years in prison. On the other hand, John, having betrayed his wife, found that she couldn't bear it and decided to divorce him. One moment of temptation he couldn't resist led to his family falling apart. He truly lost everything in this deal. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. The first time seeing Anne was in Luke's 2nd year of working away from home. Take note of this skilled worker in front of us, named Ron. Due to genetics, he's not very tall, but he works very hard. After work that day, his new co-worker, David, invited Luke over to his place. Only David's mom was home, cleaning. At first glance at David's mom, Luke felt he was immediately drawn to her. Anne wasn't very beautiful, but she was strong, tall and broad-shouldered. She looked very young, around her early 30s. She was very warm-hearted, and her voice was soft, making people feel comfortable. She felt very kind. Luke kept staring at her, listening to the sound of her voice, paying attention to her every small movement. David didn't notice anything unusual about Luke. He was just quietly watching TV. That night, Luke had a dream. In the dream, Anne was holding his hand. Together, they were exploring the mysteries of life. The next day when he woke up, he felt weak all over, and his head was dizzy, but the scenes in the dream felt incredibly real. Since then, Luke often went to find his co-worker David, visiting David's house frequently without much reason, with a very clear purpose: to see more of Anne, to hear her voice more often. Anne was a pitiable woman. Her eyes always carried a hint of sadness. When David was 5, her husband had a woman outside of the home. He even bought a house outside and was rarely home. After that, after 3 years without a married life, the two eventually divorced by agreement to raise her child, and never remarried. A melancholic woman is the most enchanting. At least that's what young Luke thought. At the start of his romantic feelings, he didn't understand what love was, but he wanted to see Anne every day, to hear her voice. As he visited more, Anne no longer saw Luke as an outsider, and showed him constant care and concern. This made Luke feel a long-lost motherly love. When Luke was very young, his own mother had passed away due to illness. The memories of his mother were already blurred. Once, Anne jokingly said to Luke, "Why don't you be my godson? That way, I'd have 2 handsome sons." David quickly chimed in, "We're already like brothers anyway." Luke was overjoyed, shyly replying, "I think calling you sister would be more fitting." This made Anne laugh warmly. She hadn't felt this happy in years. Although he was very busy at work, Ron still found time to visit David's house. After not seeing Anne for a while, he missed her. She was still as warm as ever. He remembered it was a weekend. Luke went over to play games with David, but only Anne was home. She told him David had gone to his grandma's in the countryside. He was supposed to come back that day, but something came up, so he'd return the next day instead. Knowing his friend wasn't home, Luke was about to leave. Anne, happy to see him, cheerfully said, "It's rare you're here. Why don't you stay for lunch?" The atmosphere was good. They chatted as they ate, talking about many things. They also drank quite a bit. After lunch and drinks, Luke's face turned red. Anne looked even more charming and mature, with a slight flush on her face. Perhaps emboldened by the alcohol, Luke mustered up the courage and said, "Anne, I really like you. Let's be together." Anne was taken aback. She might have felt a little flustered, not daring to look Luke in the eyes. Luke became anxious. He knelt in front of her and said, "I'm serious." And calmly said, "You silly boy. You're still young, you don't understand. I don't blame you." Luke was emotional, pouring out how he'd begun to notice her, how he'd fallen for her, all of it. Anne was surprised. She might never have imagined Luke would like her, or that he'd confess to her. "You're still young. We're more than 10 years apart. I'm older than you. If you keep saying this, I'll get upset." Luke sincerely replied, "It doesn't matter if you reject me. I just wanted to let you know my feelings are genuine." And didn't turn him down further. Her eyes started to tear up. She said, "Please don't do this. Stand up." This mature face had never been so close to Luke before. That year, Luke was 24, and Anne was 40. That night, Anne couldn't sleep. She thought, if only she were a bit younger, and Luke a bit older, she would truly marry him, love him deeply and cherish him forever. From then on, they often exchanged messages secretly from David, video calling and sharing sweet, intimate words. Luke saw Anne as his girlfriend, and Anne saw Luke as her boyfriend. They both knew that this relationship might not have a future, but neither of them could bear to part. Because some love isn't something you can control at will, especially when family feelings are involved. Tonight, Anne thought for a long time. She decided it was time to tell her son everything. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. In his early 40s, Bill had a successful career, with a net worth over $10 million. In his youth, his wife worked alongside him to build their business from scratch. As the business grew, his wife continued helping him manage the company. Now middle-aged, as time went on, the relationship between Bill and his wife had gradually become routine. In 2012, during a night out drinking, Bill met a young, beautiful woman. She had an impressive figure. Through conversation, he learned she was a college student named Sarah. As they continued talking, Bill got to know more about Sarah's situation. At 21, Sarah was working her way through college, earning her tuition and living expenses for the next semester through various jobs. Bill admired the young woman in front of him, appreciating her independence and resilience at such a young age, which set her apart from the opportunistic people he usually encountered in business circles. Afterward, they exchanged contact information. In the days that followed, they frequently chatted online. Gradually, they became close friends who could talk about anything. Over time, Sarah would occasionally message Bill. Not about important topics, but simply to share uplifting conversations. During his work breaks, Bill would also exchange a few words with her. Sarah was very lively, and sometimes a bit quirky. Bill felt completely at ease talking with her. Through their conversations, Bill learned that Sarah's family was very poor. Her family had sacrificed nearly everything to send her to college. Once she got to university, she took on various part-time jobs whenever she could. Her living expenses were mostly self-earned. Over time, Bill began to feel something different for Sarah. One evening, Sarah messaged Bill again, saying that the new semester was approaching, and she hadn't yet saved enough for tuition. She hoped Bill could lend her some money. Bill felt an ache in his heart. Without hesitation, he transferred several $1,000s to her and told her she didn't need to pay it back. From that point on, they stayed in even closer contact, occasionally discussing deep topics, like the origins of life. A few months later, Sarah invited Bill to meet in person. They went to a nearby hotel. That night, Sarah drained Bill emotionally and physically. Sarah became Bill's mistress. Bill would often give Sarah a living allowance, making sure she didn't feel deprived. Until one day, Bill suddenly received a call from Sarah. She said she was pregnant with his child. Bill panicked. He urged Sarah to terminate the pregnancy, but Sarah refused outright, insisting on having the baby. Because of this, Sarah took a break from school and returned to her hometown. She also messaged Bill, saying that she would definitely bring their love child into the world. In March 2013, Sarah gave birth to a baby girl. Since the situation had unfolded this way, Bill decided not to shirk his responsibilities. He frequently sent money to Sarah, and each time, the amount was substantial, partly out of concern for the child, and partly out of fear that upsetting Sarah might lead her to pressure him into divorcing his wife. To secure his mistress and child, the wealthy Bill spent over $1 million to buy Sarah a house. When the baby was just a few months old, Sarah launched a second wave of requests. She said she wanted to start a business for you and for our child. I gave up my education. Bill didn't think twice and generously provided over $1 million to help Sarah open a beauty salon. After the birth of their second and third children, Bill began to grow suspicious. He tentatively asked Sarah if the children were really his, or if she had them with someone else. Sarah took the moral high ground, accusing Bill of shirking his responsibilities to his children. This tactic worked. It immediately dispelled Bill's doubts. The two continued their relationship as sweetly as before. After Sarah's beauty salon failed, Bill opened a hotel for her and even bought her a luxury car worth hundreds of thousands. Over 6 years, Bill spent nearly $20 million on Sarah. One day, by chance, Bill's wife noticed his transfer records. The amounts were significant. After pressing him for answers, Bill had no choice but to confess that he had a mistress and children outside the marriage. His wife, after thinking calmly, found something amiss. She posed a fundamental question. You never did a paternity test. How can you be sure those children are yours? Her words were a wake-up call. Bill realized his wife had a very valid point. So, Bill confronted Sarah and suggested a paternity test. To his surprise, the next day, Sarah disappeared without a trace. He couldn't contact her no matter what. Bill realized he'd been deceived. He quickly reported it to the authorities. Even more surprisingly, not long after he filed the report, Sarah actually turned herself in. Was it out of guilt? Of course not. It turned out that while Sarah was pregnant with their second child, she had married her boyfriend back in her hometown. The most devastating part for Bill was the paternity tests revealed that none of the 3 children were his. In the interrogation room, Sarah remained completely calm. She said she had already divorced her husband before turning herself in, and transferred all her assets to his name. One has to admit, Sarah was indeed clever. She sacrificed herself for money, while ensuring her family's safety. But sadly, her cleverness backfired. Sarah was found guilty of fraud, and the assets she transferred to her husband were all frozen. Although Bill was the victim, he was also morally culpable. A person who neglects their family responsibilities will eventually face consequences. Bill reflected deeply on his experiences. As for Sarah, she faces a long prison sentence ahead. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.